Yesterday, Namibia joined the rest of the world in commemorating the 75th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, that is on the 10th of December. The global observance serves as a reminder of the importance of human rights, emphasizing equality and dignity for all people. To further unpack the progress and challenges that human rights landscapes in Namibia faced over the years, we are joined by human rights activist Uhuru Dempers. Good morning, sir, and thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to Good Morning Namibia.
Good morning, and thanks so much for having me.
All right. Happy International Human Rights Day. I know it was yesterday, but we are commemorating it today.
Yes.
All right.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Now, as I mentioned, Namibia has joined the rest of the world in commemorating International Human Rights Day. So what would you say is the importance and the essence of this day?
Yes, this year in particular, it's significant because we are marking the 75 years after the adoption of the UN Human Rights Declaration. After the shocking and barbaric killings and all the things that happened in First World War and Second World War, and the genocides that were committed, including the first genocide of the 20th century here in Namibia, and other experiences of human beings around the world, I think it was time to come together to establish some kind of minimum standards, and that was the justification for the world to come together to draft this human rights declaration. It was really to say we need to stop this barbarism, this horrific killings, and indiscriminate killings of human beings, and we need to find ways of understanding and building peace. There has been throughout this year celebrations and different activities, and also at the UN Human Rights Headquarters in Geneva over the weekend, there were massive celebrations to mark this occasion. Of course, as Namibian civil society, we also had a chance last month where we hosted over 250 human rights defenders from all over Southern Africa to mark this commemoration. Of course, in Namibia, there's an added element that about 64 years ago, on this day, there was another barbaric massacre of innocent Namibians by the South African apartheid regime, and we have dedicated this day to mark the heroism and the contribution of women towards the liberation struggle in Namibia, but also looking at their status, although we have made progress looking at how we can improve the status of women in Namibia.
Apart from progress towards the status of women in Namibia, what progress has been made towards human rights in Namibia, and what challenges still exist today in that regard?
Yes, I think also before I come to the challenges in Namibia, the celebrations globally were also really dampened, and there were mixed emotions because although maybe 75 years ago, these drafters that were preparing this human rights declaration had high hopes that within 75 years there would be peace, there would be enjoyment of these basic fundamental human rights by all human beings. We have seen, as we are marking the 75 years celebration, unfortunate wars all over the world, notably the killing of innocent civilians in Gaza. I mean, the count is now 17,000 civilians that has been killed, and 7,000 of them are innocent children. If we look on the continent here in South Sudan, in Sudan, in the DRC, in other places, in West Africa where there's been military coups, there's still continued unrest and so on. So Globally, we are regressing in a number of areas, although we have achieved a lot with human rights in a number of countries. Back home in Namibia, I think there is general consensus that in terms of political and civic rights, we have made significant progress. And in fact, we are up for review by the United Nations in March next year to look at our political and civic rights, how far we've achieved that. But we have made some progress there. We've achieved press freedom, freedom of association is there. There has been some concerns around when the police were heavy-handed with the demonstrations by the youth around unemployment and even the shutdown campaigns by especially female youth protesters some few years ago. So I think the police also needs to look into how they handle demonstrations and to maintain the respect for the freedom of association and expression. I think our challenges in Namibia is in terms of the economic part of the rights. We can agree that majority of Namibians still lack the basic fundamental human rights, right to food and nutrition. There's still innocent children dying of hunger in this country. Shelter, there's still 40% of the citizens living in unacceptable housing conditions called informal settlements and shacks. We've made considerable progress in terms of education and health, but there is still some serious concerns that we need to address. The clean water, sanitation. These are still areas where we are lacking, and we need to pay serious attention to those ones.
All right. Thank you so much for that explanation. Now, as a human rights defender yourself, how would you say the landscape of human rights activism has evolved over the years?
Yes. Unfortunately, after independence, Namibia was seen as a destination for a lot of international support. We were receiving a lot of support from international donors that also supported us during the struggle for independence. But 10, 20 years after independence, this support has disappeared, partly also because of Namibia's classification as an upper middle income country. So a number of human rights organizations have closed down in this country. Some had to scale down. I mean, before independence and immediately after independence, we had different branches of the Legal Assistance Center in different places, and people could go there for free legal advice and to complain about their human rights issues and so on. But due to the cuts in donor funding, this has really not been that effective as we would like. Also, in terms of the education around human rights, there has been some serious lack. I remember participating several years in workshops where we developed some material for teaching of human rights in our schools, and it seems as if with the reform of the education system and the curriculum, some of this has sort of faded away, and there is a need to reintroduce serious human rights education in our schools, human rights and civic education in our schools. So there's also lack of protection for human rights defenders, and we need to look at what extra measures we can bring in to ensure that human rights defenders are protected individually, but also collectively. So we have evolved, but we have become weakened the last few years because of support, and unfortunately, our public resources has not been availed for local human rights defenders to be able to perform their duties to assist in the protection of human rights. Office of the Ombudsman is also complaining about lack of capacity, additional capacity is required, funding is required, and so on. So those are the areas that we need to pay attention to.
All right. I want us to really remain more on this aspect of support and collaboration, which really is crucial in achieving anything and in the field of human rights. It's because this is definitely not an exception also in this field of human rights. Looking at the years that have passed, as you mentioned, you had international donors assisting. The Ministry of Education was also a partner. What other successful partnerships existed then, and how can these be strengthened today, if we were just to further elaborate?
Yes, we are really satisfied with the collaboration we have had as civil society with the Ministry of Justice, which is really the main focal point in terms of coordination of human rights work and especially reporting to the UN in terms of the different covenants and protocols and conventions that Namibia has signed up to. We have, over the past few years, spent time convened by the Ministry of Justice to develop a tracking system to look at the recommendations that have been made by these review panels of the United Nations, to what extent we are working on those, so that come the next cycle of reporting, we can report progress. And there is a integrated system that has been developed that we are using now, and we are hoping that all ministries and agencies will collaborate so that we can report effectively as Namibians. We don't just want to look good to the external world, but we really want to make fundamental progress. As I've indicated, we have also had discussions with the Ombudsman to look at areas of collaboration, especially around issues of marginalized communities. It's really shameful that some marginalized communities are treated as second-class citizens in an independent Namibia, and this is an area that we need to pay attention to. There's a white paper that was developed many years ago. It got stuck in the bureaucracy, state bureaucracy, and we are hoping that some of these policy documents will come forth and be implemented. Again, as I said, we need to go back to the Ministry of Education and look at what happened to these wonderful materials that we developed with UNESCO to look at fundamental human rights education into our school curriculum and how we can revive that. But also for out-of-school youth, for citizens out there, how can government and civil society collaborate to really educate citizens around their human rights? Sometimes if citizens are not educated about their human rights, they tend to see the assistance and service delivery that is coming from government as a generosity of a particular politician or an institution, not looking at this as an obligation of the state to be able to assist them. And sometimes politicians can also misuse the ignorance of our people to link their support to votes and all kinds of things. So there's a need to really educate citizens. Also, Parliament needs to play a bigger role. We have appreciated the increased presence of Parliament with public hearings on a number of issues. What we are just concerned about is that once these reports are given to Parliament, both National Assembly and National Council, there is not effective follow-up to make sure that those recommendations from the public hearings are carried through by the responsible political leadership in the ministries and the bureaucrats in those agencies. So if I think all these parties that I've mentioned collaborate, we can make a lot of progress in terms of human rights in Namibia.
Now, apart from the awareness that should be created amongst the citizens and the communities alike, what role can they play in promoting and protecting human rights?
Yes, I think that awareness that is created among citizens will ensure that citizens, for example, becomes whistleblowers when they see, say, corrupt activities being committed in their communities or at their places of work in government or in private sector. So citizens will be educated about the instruments that they can use to report those kind of cases, and also the protection that is available, because sometimes people observe corrupt activities, but because these activities have been committed by powerful individuals that are linked to powerful agencies, citizens sometimes look the other way and do not report this. So if we can inform them about the provisions of the Whistleblower Protection Act and the regulations that have been developed, also if we can speed up the implementation of the Access to Information Act, then citizens will have access to relevant information in terms of service delivery, in terms of the budget, the resources that have been allocated, and so on. And based on that information can demand for better delivery of service, and through that their fundamental human rights could be met. So this civic education should really lead to not only informing them about the human rights declarations and the conventions and so on, but also what laws and avenues are available within our legislative and policy environment that they can use of to claim their rights. In Namibia is very important also that, because in Article 144, that states that once Namibia has signed up to these international conventions and declarations, this forms part of our legal system, and citizens can demand those rights in those conventions as much as those that are in our constitution and in our legislation that we developed here in Namibia. So it is important that we are not only aware of the acts and policies in Namibia, but also these international instruments, and can look at avenues that citizens can use to assert their human rights and can improve the human rights situation in Namibia.
Well, as we round up our conversation, what would you say is your perfect dream towards the future of human rights in Namibia?
Well, I have a dream not only for Namibia, but for the continent, but also globally. My dream is really for peace, and without peace, it's really impossible to achieve a lot of those other rights. So I hope and pray for peace in Palestine, in other hotspots around the world, in Ukraine, in Sudan, in other places where there are red flags going on. I really hope and pray for a Namibia where citizens enjoy the blessings, the natural resources that the good Lord has blessed us with, and does not only get enjoyed by a privileged few, but that there is broad-based economic empowerment, so that we are able to meet not only the political and civic rights of our citizens, but also can achieve the dream of economic freedom in our lifetime.
Mr. Dempers, thank you so much for joining us this morning, and we wish you a peaceful day.
Thank you. The same to you and your viewers.